It's an article that popped up today. I figured I'd share it with you. Essential Led Zeppelin albums. This can be found at the Discogs site. Led Zeppelin's influence on rock and roll transcends time. These albums are a testament to their genius. Now, is, 9, 10 studio albums, greatest hits, live? I have no idea. You are no stranger to Led Zeppelin and their hits, whether your local rock station plays them on repeat or you recognize their tracks from iconic movie scenes. The band's influence has made their music a staple of pop culture. Most categorize Led Zeppelin's discography as classic rock or hard rock, though they are now considered early pioneers of heavy metal. However, blues, folk, and fantasy lore also shaped their sound, inspiring equally legendary compositions. Led Zeppelin formed in 1968 following the breakup of another iconic English band, the Yardbirds. Jimmy Page was their guitarist for 2 years until their dissolution, and then tried to form a group with fellow ex-Yardbird Jeff Beck. While plans for that project ultimately fell through, Page continued recruiting members, bringing together the now iconic lineup consisting of himself, John Paul Jones on bass and keyboard, John Bonham on drums, and of course Robert Plant on vocals. This lineup actually started as the New Yardbirds, but quickly rebranded as Led Zeppelin, which was inspired by a now famous assumption that a Page and Beck collaboration would, quote, go down like a lead balloon, unquote. Led Zeppelin released 8 studio albums over 11 years before disbanding in 1980 following Bonham's death from substance abuse. The surviving members have reunited several times, often with Bonham's son Jason on drums, leading to various live albums and remasters. Notably, a 2020 release on 180-gram vinyl has kept Led Zeppelin's records both in demand and accessible to new and longtime fans alike. As Becoming Led Zeppelin, a new 2025 documentary film on the band, arrives in theaters, we dug deep to look back at some of the classic albums in the Led Zeppelin discography. Starting with Led Zeppelin, the debut from 1969, Zeppelin's self-titled debut album, often called Zeppelin I, arrived at a time when rock bands and supergroups were battling for attention. A powerful mix of blues, folk, and hard rock, it introduced the world to Page's masterful guitar work, Robert Plant's soaring vocals, and John Paul Jones' steady bass lines, and John Bonham's thunderous drumming. Good Times, Bad Times, and Communication Breakdown fueled discussions about heavy rock, but the album remains the band's bluesiest. Plant's wailing vocals and Page kills in crafting and adapting in the case of Dazed and Confused. Outright stealing classic scales and riffs define its sound. Original pressings of Led Zeppelin I continue to command top dollar from collectors. We continue on now with Led Zeppelin II. The year was 1969, one of the busy ones for the band. Led Zeppelin quickly followed up their debut with Led Zeppelin II, which was recorded while they were touring across Britain and North America. Led Zeppelin II achieved even greater success on charts and in record sales, though critics initially gave it a lukewarm reception. Tracks like Whole Lotta Love and the blistering solo in Heartbreaker pushed the early concept of heavy metal forward. Meanwhile, What Is and What Should Never Be and Ramble On introduced more experimental sounds and the band's first nods to J.R.R. Tolkien's fantastical works. Over time, the album's raw energy, blues-driven foundation, and heavier approach left a lasting mark on the evolution of rock music. Continuing on with Led Zeppelin III. Released in 1970, Led Zeppelin III marked a significant departure from the band's previous work, embracing acoustic and folk influences. The album introduced a wider array of instruments, with Jones emerging as a standout multi-instrumentalist, incorporating mandolin, organ, and other elements that expanded the band's sound. Songs like Tangerine and Gallows Pole highlighted their versatility, blending folk storytelling with dynamic arrangements. Meanwhile, tracks like Immigrant Song retained their heavier edge, ensuring the band's hard rock roots remained intact. Despite initial skepticism for some fans, Led Zeppelin III became a pivotal album in the band's catalog, demonstrating their ability to evolve and innovate while maintaining the raw energy that defined their sound. And of course, moving on to the untitled 1971 release, Led Zeppelin's 4th studio album is untitled, but it is referred to as Led Zeppelin IV. 4 symbols, due to the now iconic 4 symbols on the back, or Zoso, due to some people's interpretation of one of those symbols. No matter what you call it, this masterpiece, one of the most collected albums on Discogs, is consistently cited as Led Zeppelin's best work and includes the quintessential Stairway to Heaven, as well as a range of songs that show some of their influences. When the Levee Breaks is a cover of a blues song. Battle of Evermore feels like a fantasy epic and features folk singer Sandy Denny, and the aptly named Rock and Roll is just that. Next that follows is 1973's Houses of the Holy, which celebrated its 50th anniversary in 2023, further showcased Led Zeppelin's willingness to push musical boundaries. Page, Plant, Jones, and Bonham delivered more intricate arrangements, blending acoustic and electronic elements seamlessly, perfectly exemplified in Over the Hills and Far Away. The album marked a shift from the blues-heavy sound of their earlier work, embracing diverse influences like psychedelic rock on No Quarter and reggae on Dire Maker. Led Zeppelin also experimented with non-standard tunings and unconventional melodies, adding layers to their evolving style. This would be their final release on a major label before venturing into uncharted territory with Swan Song, their own record label, solidifying their artistic and business independence. Next up is, of course, 1975's Physical Graffiti, and is the first album released on Led Zeppelin's own label, Swan Song, and features the orchestral Kashmir, which has been used countless times in film and television. It's also a sprawling masterpiece and arguably Led Zeppelin's most ambitious work. Recorded in early 1974, the song selected for the album covered just under 3 sides of an LP, so the band went back into the vaults and unearthed previously unreleased tracks from previous recording sessions to expand the release into a double album. Initially planned for a summer 1974 release, the album was delayed because the die-cut album cover was difficult to manufacture. Shortly after its release, all previous Led Zeppelin albums simultaneously re-entered the top 200 album chart. And Through the Outdoor, released in 1979, this album showcased a more introspective side of Led Zeppelin. The band leaned into synthesizers, moving further from their hard rock beginnings and embracing a more experimental approach. Tracks like All of My Love, Full in the Rain, and Carousel Alhambra demonstrated their musical versatility, even as they navigated a period of transition. Page later reflected on the album's direction, stating, "We wanted, after In Through the Outdoor, to make something hard-hitting and riff-based again. Of course, we never got to make that album." In September 1980, drummer John Bonham died at the age of 32, marking the end of Led Zeppelin as a band and closing the final chapter of their legendary run.